The beginning of this story actually represents where most stories end. You have these fighters who are attacking a government position. One of them gets shot, wounded badly, possibly killed. The rebels fire an RPG at the government position, and then the government fire back with a tank. And it's that image of the two rebels surrounded by the debris at the moment of impact that really caught our attention. And it's an extraordinarily difficult photograph to make. Goran Tomasevich is a very experienced war photographer, and I'm pretty certain that when that RPG went off, Goran would have anticipated what would come next. When the jury were looking at this story, for us it was a terrific example of a very sort of classic spot news story. The photographer is responding to something way beyond their control, something that's very immediate and very urgent, and doing so with enormous skill. This photograph of the bomb maker in Aleppo by Moises Saman was an intriguing image, and it sort of disappeared every now and again during the voting process, and the story eventually disappeared. But this single image kept being brought back, and I think one of the reasons why it was just really surprising. It was really ambiguous. It looked like it could have been somebody in the south of France bottling wine. But actually, it's a bomb maker in Syria. And rather than being a spectacular and sort of image that had been made to look violent and had been loaded with the language of violence and foreboding, this image was incredibly subtle, actually, and very bright, very light. It's a surprising image of this subject. The jury felt that the nature story was both incredibly well executed, very difficult to photograph, and addressed a really important relationship of the natural world, in this case a mountain lion, with humankind. You have to understand that where the animals pass, where they're walking, and anticipate where they're going to be. It's an extraordinary, long process, and we just felt that this was just so beautifully done. You see the Hollywood sign in the last picture. It's a photograph taken by a remote camera, but you can see that proximity of this wild cat. So the jury felt that this story tackled a really important issue in a very innovative way, and obviously it's very conceptual, it's very rigorous, even dogmatic. It was a powerful act of communication using very simple form and very straightforward photography. But we thought it was a very sophisticated way of addressing a very well photographed story. There's a sort of progression through this story, and the clothes slowly start to disappear and become smaller and smaller fragments. What also caught the jury's eye was a photograph of the clothing that remained from a 17 or 18-year-old girl, her underwear, and there's sort of vulnerability in that photograph. But we thought this was just a really well constructed, really well conceived act of communication about a very important issue. Nelson Mandela's funeral is obviously one of the major events that mark the year, and it provided us with a pretty significant selection of stories and individual images to choose from. This jury didn't feel obliged to represent every issue that was photographed this year, nor did we feel that just because an event or an issue was of significant importance that it had to be represented. But this photograph really gave us the opportunity to represent the funeral of Nelson Mandela in the portrait section. And Gillian Edelstein, the chairwoman of the portrait jury, felt that this was just a beautifully observed, natural portrait that allowed us actually to include the funeral